Well, I think it's pretty easy to see how this passage fits into a series based on awe, right? A lot of awe and delight in there. The psalmist is using imagery to describe the steadfast love of God. And those inspire awe in us, don't they? The phrase about drinking from your river of delights definitely makes it appropriate for our service today. Awe is typically associated with vast and mysterious things, right? We can't quite get our head around them, so they inspire awe. And Christians typically associate awe with God or the divine, while delight can regularly be found in everyday moments in everyday life, anything that makes you smile and perks you up. Awe and delight can be experienced together, kind of like when you witness a stunning panorama all around you that brings awe, but it also delights you, or experiencing a moment of profound connection with somebody else where you've connected at a really deep level. Well, this section of the psalm was selected for a reason. It talked about what we were talking about. It's also the section from Psalm 36 that's been selected for reading that's included in the Revised Common Lectionary, which is a 3-year list of scripture readings for each Sunday and go on a 3-year cycle. So they've selected that as well. It's one of those times that we only read a portion of a psalm because it says what we want to hear. And when we do that, we miss the point of the contrasts that the writer is making in this psalm. We miss the point that he is making. Yes, God's love is awesome. We don't question that at all. But that lovely description is wedged into the middle of the psalm. The middle section that we just heard is describing what the wicked are going to miss out on. Those who do not love God, who do not believe in God, and who do not honor God in any way miss out on that deep beauty of the cosmos. They're too busy feathering their own nests by any means possible to worry whether there is even such a thing as right or wrong in the universe. They are not only sinful, but unwise, and they are fools. So you really do need to look at the beginning and ending verses of this psalm to fully appreciate it. That way we can come to understand what the poet is getting at with this middle part. Because when the psalmist steps back, he sees that the beauty and the love and the power of God envelop us everywhere. It's as high as the highest heavens and reaches to the depths of the earth and everything in between. It is under the shelter of God's wings that we take refuge. So the psalm starts off by describing human wickedness, their pride and their arrogance. It reminds us of the world that we live in. The psalmist writes, "Sin whispers to the wicked deep within their hearts. They have no fear of God at all. In their blind conceit, they cannot see how wicked they really are. Everything they say is crooked and deceitful. They refuse to act wisely or to do good. They lie awake at night hatching sinful plots. Their actions are never good. They make no attempt to turn from evil." That is where we're going to call it David wrote this, we're told. That's where David begins. He wants to remind us of the world that we live in. He probably was living it at that point and experiencing it. He also wants us to not lose sight of what the unbelieving world around us is like. If we aren't careful, we can be overcome by them. We need to be aware so that we do not conform to their ways. And then David moves on to the scriptures that reading we heard today. David wants us to remember who God is. Your unfailing love, O God, is as vast as the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches beyond the clouds. Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains, your justice like the ocean depths. You care for people and animals alike, O Lord. How precious is your unfailing love, O God. All humanity finds shelter in the shadow of your wings. You feed them from the abundance of your house, letting them drink from your river of delights. for you are the fountain of life, the light by which we see. Now, these verses are the heart of the psalm, and they are also a source of hope for us. God's steadfast love and faithfulness stands in clear contrast to human wickedness. The world may be one way, but God is totally different. God's righteousness stands in clear contrast to human deceit and immorality. God's amazing grace is not limited to just the people of Israel or the people in the church. There is a wideness to God's love that expands to all people. David doesn't tell us about the wicked so that we can have these beautiful analogies in this lovely contrast. He does it so we might see the righteousness of God in it, to see how God is different than people. It also reminds us we are not alone in this world. We're seeking to be transformed rather than being conformed to the world, and Paul wrote about that a lot. But the good news is we don't have to do that alone because God is with us. We have one who is for us and in us, one who is greater than the world. And David wants to remind us who that God is. David tells us that as we consider the world, don't stop there. Otherwise, we might become overwhelmed. We need to stop, consider God, and remember who God is. You know, there's a tragedy to be observed here, though. This middle part of the poem tells us what the wicked miss out on because of their short-sightedness and their sinful ways. Those that do not believe in God, that do not love God, and who do not honor God in any way miss out on this deep beauty of the universe. The wicked are too busy flattering themselves with their lies. They tell themselves that leave them sinless in their own eyes. They don't see it. They're too busy feathering their own nests by any means possible to worry, that they don't have time to worry whether anything's right or wrong in the universe. They think that everything's okay. They're not sinful, but unwise. They are fools. For you are the fountain of life, the light by which we see. God is that bright center of the universe and all of human existence. So it makes sense that God is the shining sun, the light that doesn't even need a source in order to shine. If you think back to Genesis 1 and you read through it, God created light before God created the sun, the moon, or the stars. The light doesn't come from them, it comes from God. God illuminates everything else. For you are the fountain of life, the light by which we see. Maybe these words are what led C.S. Lewis to say, I believe in Christianity, and I'm going to you can insert God there too as well, I think. I believe in God as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. Really, doesn't God help you to see everything else in the proper perspective? And then David added these final verses. Pour out your unfailing love on those who love you. Give justice to those with honest hearts. Don't let the proud trample me or the wicked push me around. Look, those who do evil have fallen. They are thrown down, never to rise again. We're reminded of the blessings that are ours, God's unfailing love and God's justice. And that is what the wicked miss out on. No love, no justice. With David, we can ask God to deliver us from the wicked. When you look at those opening and closing verses, it helps us to better appreciate what the poet's getting at in that middle part. It's what we have as a believer in Yahweh or God. The psalmist steps back. He sees that the love and beauty and power of God envelop us. They're everywhere. God's love is in the sky above. God's justice is in the deepest depths of the earth. And in between the heights and those depths, it's under the shadow of God's wings that we take refuge. We rest. You know, the sun doesn't need our help to come up tomorrow. We don't need to reinvent the world anew each day. We don't need to make a life for ourselves because God himself is our life. And from God's riches, we eat and we drink and we feast at a banquet table of peace, love, and grace. We are awed. All right, not missing one. We're awed by God's creation, miracles, and amazing grace. We drink from God's river of delights. The spirituality of delight is a spirituality that enjoys, appreciates, and experiences the pleasure of God's creation. Things that God made that we can see and hear and touch and taste and smell. But we need to take a lesson from the wicked. We can fall into trouble when those delights are not equally accessible to everyone. When those delights numb us to the responsibility of stewardship that God has given us over creation. Or when those delights are taken in excess and transforms delight into damage. It reminds me of those signs in the parks. Take only pictures, leave only footprints. In other words, do no damage. The delights God has given us are tastes of the greater delight, that fountain of life. All that is good and delightful in creation is a taste, a sample of the actual incomprehensible goodness and delight of God. Delight, when used to connect with God, is a good thing. Delight leads us to a sense of awe and appreciation. Marcia McPhee is the creator of this worship series, and in her notes with it, she writes, "We all have places where we sense a closeness to the divine. We get a feeling from these places, a sensation, a very real physical phenomenon like goosebumps or having your breath taken away or a deep longing filled." And then Marcia continues, "I have a phrase when I have such experiences. My delight bucket is filled up." Her delight bucket is filled up. It's a great way to think about it, isn't it? But Marcia's not the only one with a delight bucket. We all have a space or a bucket that becomes empty. And when our bucket's empty, we can't experience awe. And so our bucket needs to be refilled. Experiences of delight help to fill our bucket again. None of us have a bucket that's permanently full, much as we might like to pretend. Everyone's bucket has to be refilled at one time or another, and usually multiple times here and there. But how you fill your bucket varies for each person. It's not the same. We need to learn what activities help to fill our bucket. When your bucket becomes empty, you know what you can go back to. You know how to fill it again. Well, even Jesus seems to have needed to fill his bucket, because throughout the Gospels we hear of Jesus going up on the mountain to pray. He went to spend time alone with his Father, somewhere away from the crowds and the demands that the world were putting on him. Mountains seem to have been a place where Jesus chose to feel the delight of creation. And Jesus seems to often have gone up at night, and I think maybe it's because that's when the crowds weren't so pushing so hard, but maybe it's because he enjoyed it. And when he went up, he would pray all night long. But can you imagine the scene? Jesus climbs up, and he turns around to see the land stretched out in front of him. The evening's falling, maybe the stars are coming out, the sea might be glistening in the sunset. Then those stars really pop out. Can you imagine how Jesus delighted in the solitude, the quiet, the ability to just simply be? Perhaps it was on the mountaintop that he could sense most deeply that intimate connection with the holy. Well, some of us likely experience that connection on mountaintops as well. You know, you look out at the panorama all around you, and you get to feel that fresh mountain breeze. Other of us experience that in other places. but we each have places where we sense that we are closer to God, and those moments help to fill our buckets. So how do you fill your bucket? Where do you go to reconnect? What do you do to reconnect? Remember, no one's bucket is ever full all the time. So as that level goes down, it needs to be refilled, hopefully before you get all the way to the bottom of that bucket. So we need to be attentive and to notice the level in our buckets, know when we're hitting that point before it gets too low, because it's always easier to fill a bucket that's partially full. So we all need to refill our bucket at some point. Think back to the pandemic. Overnight, we went into lockdown. We weren't able to go where we typically went or do what we typically did. We were no longer able to go and spend time with people that we enjoyed being with. And our buckets all started draining. We began to experience depression, loneliness, and become emotionally drained. The level in our buckets went down. Well, over time, we finally started finding ways to do things that would refill our buckets. People started making more phone calls. People that didn't know how, learned how to do a video call so they could actually see their loved ones. And we started finding ways for groups to get together online. We said, oh, it's not the same, but at least it was something. And then we started having gatherings with small groups of people that we felt were safe to be around because they hadn't been around a lot of places where people were sick. And then we started journeying out and visiting places that we could enjoy, mostly outside. We'd go for walks, visit a park. Daryl and I started eating at a restaurant that had outdoor seating. We thought that was a great way to get out of the house. And we all started to feel a little less cooped up, and we started feeling our buckets started filling up. They weren't as empty as they had been. But we had to be intentional about finding things that bring us delight during that difficult time. We had to start noticing the things that would bring us joy. Did going for a walk fill you up? Did a phone call fill you up? You needed to pay attention and do more of those. Well, during that time, we were living in a parsonage next to the church, and we decided that I would work at home during the week. We were trying to keep people out of the church building as much as we could, and we weren't having service except online either. But I would work in my home office, and outside my home office was a hummingbird feeder. And so I was spending a lot of time at that desk. Well, I had always enjoyed the hummingbirds and having them fly in and watch, but during that time, I started to notice the hummingbirds. I had certain ones that came. In fact, one of them was this little one that would come and sit on the feeder and kind of look around and sit and eat and then look around, perfectly content being this, and this actually stuck on the window, so they were this far from my window. And then I noticed there was a little one that came. Somebody had had a baby, evidently, but they all had different personalities. I had never noticed all that before, but that brought me delight, getting to know my little hummingbirds. And those little creatures helped to fill my bucket. Obviously, that doesn't do a lot in winter. I'm really excited that the hummingbirds will be back in just a couple weeks. So you have to find what works for you. Hummingbirds, butterflies, whatever. I think filling our bucket is a skill that we lose over time. I think we're better at it when we're children. It seems to come so easily to kids. They just go out and find delight in everything, and we have to kind of work at to figure out how to do that again. Some of the simplest things will delight a child. A trip to the park, going down the slide, throwing a football, doesn't have to be anything too big. For children, things are new and exciting, and it fills them with delight. You know, we could take some bucket-filling lessons from children. In watching them, we can learn to pay attention, to notice, and to take time to do what we enjoy. It doesn't have to be a trip up a mountain. It can be something simple, like a trip to a local park or even your backyard. So how do you fill your bucket? First thing we need to do is pay attention to the level in our bucket. We have to pay attention and notice when it's going down. You have to stop and notice what things fill your bucket so that you know what ones you need when you need to fill that bucket. What is it that brings you joy and delight and fills your bucket? And then let's do those things. And don't wait till your bucket's empty. Do them on a regular basis. Find out what it is and where it is that you best reconnect with God. Remember, don't wait till it gets empty. Fill it when you're starting to see the level go down. We don't have to wait till we hit that major depression. Let's do it sooner. How about doing something every day that raises that level in your bucket, something that you've noticed? And if you say, I don't know what that is, keep paying attention. But might I suggest spending some time alone with God in prayer, in God's word, and in silence? That's what Jesus did. And if it was good enough for Jesus, I'll let you finish the sentence.
Please stand.